Goody camp blood, ain't you?
God damn it, Ralph, get out of here. Go on, get. Leave people alone.
You'll never come back again.
Oh, shut up, Ralph.
It's got a death curse.
This is We Bleed Orange and Black, the podcast for Halloween and horror lovers. Join us as we interview creators, discuss our favorite horrors, and share original spooky stories. I'm Jeff C. Carter.
And I'm Ryan Gerasi.
And this week, we're talking with Ed Erdelac about his new book, 13th. Edward M. Erdelac is a writer of Jewish weird westerns, funky mystic detectives, Lovecraft, spycraft, and Star Wars. He was also a co-host on the popular podcast The Six Demon Bag. Welcome back to the show, Ed.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Would we call it popular?
If I can put my books as acclaimed, you guys can say the podcast was popular.
Here's a icebreaker for you, Ed. What do you hear?
I hear that's what I hear. I know it's kiki ma. Everybody says so. It's supposed to be like kill for ma or kill for mother. Or
like kill for mommy.
Nah, I think that guy who did the music for that, I think he just bought into his own legend and said, oh yeah, it was Ki Ma.
I worked that into the book.
I know.
Yeah, I worked that little bit in, but I don't personally believe it or subscribe to it.
I feel like it's how the creator of the GIF says it's pronounced GIF. You can argue authorial intent all you want, but yeah, I always heard it as and they were just spooky sounds.
Yeah, like night sounds, wood sounds.
Anyway, that's the Friday the 13th theme, which we are discussing because we are here to talk about Ed's new book, 13th. Ed, I'm putting 15 seconds on the clock.
Oh,
I challenge you to talk about this book in a concise way.
13th for me is the Friday the 13th story to end all Friday the 13th stories was what I was going for. The old continuity, as crazy and convoluted as it is, where he goes to space and he has a body hopping demon in him and like he comes back from the dead, how many times has he drowned, whatever. It's totally convoluted and they're going to dump it all this year when they do this new prequel show, Crystal Lake on Peacock. And I just wanted to say goodbye to that because I love all that stuff. And I used to think about it in my head, like watching these movies over and over again, I would make these weird character connections and extrapolations. Like in part 3, all right, I'm not being concise here.
The premise at the top was very concise. Now go nuts. Let it rip.
Okay, so the character names have all been changed. Consider this like a true crime story where I've changed all the names or something. Jason is Joshua, etc. and stuff. So in my book, Joshua has been killed 12 times through the various decades he's been coming back from the dead and everything, and nobody knows why. And their FBI task force is out to destroy him and stuff like they did in Jason Goes to Hell. We'll call it Joshua Goes to Hell or whatever.
Joshua goes to Hades?
To Hades, sure. So these 12 times he's been killed, and now he's back again, and his modus operandi has changed. He's traveling all over the country, hunting down people who have killed him in the past. And each time he's growing stronger. He's getting faster. He's becoming different. Then out of the past, Jason's long-estranged father that hasn't been in the picture or in any of the story at all arrives. And he's this preacher from Guatemala to redeem all that his son has done. And he's gathered together with this obsessive bounty hunter who's wheelchair bound. They're gathering together all the last survivors.
Let's roll it way back to your origin story. You were molded in part as a writer by the novelization of one of these books, right?
Yeah, my mom and my dad were very strict on my watching and everything. I couldn't watch anything that was above rated PG, So if I wanted to know what my friends were talking about when they were watching rated R movies and stuff, like I would read novelizations because I had no strictures on what I read. So like I would go to the racks and pick up novelizations, like a lot of Alan Dean Foster, Aliens, Predator, all that kind of stuff and everything. And I picked up Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives by Simon Hawke. And I read it in like one sitting. Like I devoured it. I guess it was the first horror novel I ever read, like straight horror. It would go into the mind of Jason, and he was like, it would talk about his childhood and how I think he forced a kid by staring at him to jam his hand down a garbage disposal and turn it on or something. And like, as he was stalking Tommy through the woods, he would imagine like reaching into his chest cavity and pulling out his intestines and throwing them in the trees. And I was like, as a seventh grader or whatever I was at the time, I was like wrapped, I was like, holy cow, this is the most intense thing I've ever read, like it was sickening, and exciting and like everything. And I think I read it in like 2 hours or something like that, literally sitting in the back seat of my mom's Thunderbird while she was like shopping at the mall. Like I sat there and read this whole book. And it made me want to like write all kinds of gory, crazy stuff and everything. And it did mold me. Yeah.
So you mentioned that growing up, when you finally did start to watch the Friday the 13th movies, you would imagine how they all connected and sort of what the through lines and plot lines and connections were.
I guess so, yeah, because my start was that novelization. It wasn't the movie.
Right.
And the novelization started the same way my novel starts. Simon Hawke did this kind of rundown for 2 pages or 3 pages of the whole series up until that point. And it reads like a report. First, Jason showed up here, and then like 3 days later, he turned up again. And his body was taken to the morgue, and everybody said, oh, he's surely dead this time. And then he popped up again. I don't know the way, I'm not doing it justice, but it's like, it read like a biography. So it was like very real to me, as a kid, when I was reading it, I was like this, I could imagine this, it's fantastic stuff, but it was depicted in such a way through his writing that it felt very matter of fact. Like this is just what happened. And you could accept that, a guy could be brought back to life by a lightning rod, stuff through his chest.
For me, I think the other critical component is that you were working in the Star Wars canon and you're contributing to that lore. You grew up totally immersed in that. What happened with that road?
I got into writing Star Wars. I ran the role-playing game and all its supplements and how they expanded the lore in that weird time when after Return of the Jedi, when there were years when there was no new Star Wars content, and it was all in these books and everything, and in what they called the EU, the expanded universe. And a lot of really imaginative writers expanded Star Wars in a cool way, and I was deep into that. So Lucasfilm put out this online contest every month where they would show like a picture of a background character that just like some alien that passes by in the background of Star Wars, or a droid or something. It was called What's the Story? And it offered fans a chance to kind of write in and compete to come up with a backstory that would become canon for this character. And I won it for 3 months consecutive. The last entry, actually, and that one became like a little bounty hunter figure. Like that one went on the back of a card for this action figure. So that was pretty fun and cool. And then from that, the story group reached out to me and said, do you want to write and get paid to do this? I was like, yes. So I did a couple of short stories for them. It was very research heavy. It was like writing a term paper. You had to cite your sources whenever you made any kind of reference. Luckily, I had a whole library of these game books that I could go to and cite them. And you had to cite like page number of book, paragraph, the whole deal, like literally writing a term paper. Yeah, so like I was a fanatic for that stuff and everything. And I was living and breathing and eating it. And I was trying to get a novel going. And I got to the point where I got an editor interested in a book series idea, and we wrote the first story that was going to tie into it, and it went into their fan magazine, Star Wars Insider. And then Disney just kind of came along and lowered the boom, and everything that was canonical that I had worked on and everything got cut off. They threw all the old stuff out. So it made me bitter, for a while and stuff, and it was a big heartbreaker for me.
We now see the same thing coming down the pike for Friday the 13th.
For Friday the 13th,
because
yeah.
They're going to reboot the series. And so you saw this as an opportunity to write a love letter to all the messy, clunky,
yes,
organic, serialized storytelling that has happened over the last 30 odd years.
Yeah, because that series has been like a round robin. It's like, and it's a round robin in the worst way. Like round robin always sounds like a great idea. Like, yeah, let's all get together and we'll continue this story. And nobody ever pays attention to what the guy wrote before. And the timelines make no sense. And like Jason has basically reinvented after part 6, every single time he shows up, he's reinvented, basically. He's a body hopping demon. He's a cyborg in space. He's reverts to a child, but then they just forget about that and everything. And it's just craziness. It was an exciting challenge to me to kind of go and try to make sense of all that and make it compelling at the same time and not throw it out. Like a lot of fans just discount everything after 8 and 9 and 10. There's people that don't accept that he came back, and they're just like, we discount every zombie Jason story. And I'm like, no, all that stuff is great. All that stuff is awesome. That's what pushes the character into this iconic status where he becomes unkillable, and there's a reason for it.
There's this incentive for producers anyway, for holders of IP to lock down a beloved story that has worked in the past and will work supposedly in the future. So they can reboot it over and over and over again and modernize it for a new audience. You can just remake Spider-Man and Batman endlessly. But recently there's also been pushback against things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. People are like, I don't want to watch 10 Disney Plus shows to understand what's going on. It's all confusing and contradictory. But then you have something like Child's Play that just embraces all of the madness and contradiction and reinvention. I love it.
Yeah.
I love the lore.
Previously on fucking Chucky.
For you, what was the glue in piecing all of the Friday the 13th lore together?
The father. The fact that in the movie series, like when you read, and this goes back to the novelization again. The last chapter of the novelization is Jason's father, Elias, comes to his grave and realizes that it's been disturbed. It doesn't really describe him. He's this tall figure in a long coat or something, they say, and that's pretty much the only description there is. And he has an exchange with the gravedigger, the guy. Some people have a weird idea of entertainment. That guy. He realizes that Hawes is buried in his son's grave, and he turns and he walks towards Crystal Lake. That's the last line of the book. He turned and walked toward Crystal Lake. And I was always like, wow, I can't wait for part 7. What's going to happen? And they cut that scene. They cut it out of the script because Simon Hawke wrote it off the script. So they cut that out of the script. They didn't film it, and it just never went anywhere. And I was always like, what was that story going to be? Who is that character? And like, there was a menace to him in these couple lines in this book. Like, is he good? Is he bad? Like, what's he going to do? I realized nobody was ever going to write that story. It's never going to be written. It's not in the comic book things they've done since. It's not in any of the fan stuff or anything. So I was like, I want to write that story.
That's so wild because Jason's mother looms so large over the character in the series.
Yeah.
No one has ever asked about the father. It just makes sense. It has a really nice balance to it.
I called it the Friday the 13th to end all Friday 13th, but it takes place between Freddy versus Jason and part 10. And so there's got to be a part 10. So you have to leave the opening at the end. And that was a challenge too. I was like, because I don't want to discount part 10 because I love it.
There is a Freddy Krueger analog in your story, Eddie Ruger.
Yeah.
And I think I spotted references to Dr. Loomis from the Halloween series.
Yeah, his hospital shows up for sure, yeah.
All right, Ryan, do you have any questions?
What possessed you to think that you could get away with this? Is it
Is that a threat?
Is it like, I was like, I don't think the copyright is expired on.
It's not.
Do you think it's?
We'll see, I guess.
Because it's so clearly what it is.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, my reasoning was like, okay, John Scalzi did Red Shirts, and it was obviously Star Trek, right down to the title is Red Shirts are from Star Trek. So like, I'm just kind of going with like, well, I changed all the names. I changed all and there are Conan pastiches up the wazoo where it's like Parnak.
So there's precedent.
The Barbarian, and I think there is, yeah. So I think I'll be okay. We'll find out if I'm not. But I just figured I'd be under the wire, honestly. I've done Bond, and nobody's come for me. There was Canadian copyright to deal with for that. I just don't think anybody but fans are going to care about this. It's all going to be wiped away in like a year, probably, or something. It's just something I wanted to do. It was kind of like a for the love kind of thing, which I usually don't do. I mean, I'm not writing for love. I'm writing out of hate. No.
Any other questions or comments, Frank?
I was at first a little miffed, but it's another of those moments where it pays off in a great way that you went into Jason's POV a bunch of times. What made you decide to want to do that? I mean, did you just have to?
Again, that was part of the first time I ever read Jason. You're in his head.
Oh, you're in his POV.
Yeah, a couple times. Yeah, there's times where you just slip into his head and what he's thinking, and it's all craziness. Yeah, I wanted him to be a character. Like I wanted him to not just be this like Godzilla hulking thing that's destroying everything around him. He had to be a character too. So
easily one of my favorite characters from the entire series is Creighton Duke from Jason Goes to Hell.
Yeah, he's great.
Creighton Duke.
I know who you are.
I'm gonna kill Jason Voorhees.
To me, he is a character that exists of continuity. He's a character that answers the question of, okay, if Jason is real, what else is real? Other people are just like random campers, or maybe they're related to Jason somehow and they get pulled into it. He's someone from Jason's world who's like, I'm going to make a name for myself as a bounty hunter who specializes in the most dangerous game. I'm going to track down these crazy serial slashers.
Mm-hmm.
You have him central to your book in the aforementioned wheelchair-bound bounty hunter. Who are some of your other favorite characters like that from the series?
Tommy's like the Van Helsing to Jason's Dracula. He always comes back. He's the guy that's always opposing him in like 3 movies. His absence, I feel like, in everything after part 6 kind of looms for me. Like
a lot of horror series, definitely slasher franchises, there's a tension between the final girl and the monolithic character themselves. We all love Jason. We all love Michael Myers. Well, some less than others. Laurie Strode is the heart of that story, and it doesn't really work without her. Nancy is the heart of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. In Scream, you've got Sidney, and you can even swap out who is wearing the Scream mask every single movie, or just pass the Scream mask around to dozens of people. As long as you have that survivor character, it anchors the narrative. Do you think Tommy is the final boy that is required to balance out Jason as a normally voiceless, faceless killing machine?
I think he's the most interesting foil to Jason.
He's not a victim. He knows exactly what's going on.
Yeah, his life has been sidetracked by Jason. Like he's this kid with these aspirations. He makes these masks. He's all into this stuff. He's a young Tom Savini, basically. And then like Jason comes along and kills his mother and like just upends his life entirely. And then he becomes an obsessive. He becomes like an Ahab.
Yeah. I was going to say, he needs Jason.
Yeah.
Even going so far as to resurrect him from the dead.
How many years have passed when he's dead and he leaves his hospital with his friend, goes and digs him up to be sure. And like, he can't let it go until he sees him immolated. And he ends up, by his own actions, setting it all into motion again. How many murders is he responsible for? He's the most interesting, I think, protagonist. I'm siding with Jason almost.
Well, you do a little bit. I mean, you do as the author and as the reader, because you're in his mind, and he's so innocent in his youth. You can't help but be on his side a little bit.
Yeah, and like that stems from watching these movies with my daughter. She loves Jason, and she's always like, "Look, he doesn't kill kids, and he gets upset when people are doing bad things around him and stuff or something." She calls it bad, but whatever. Yeah, there's an innocence to Jason. He's how manipulated he is, and really in that one in Freddy versus Jason. He's totally a man-child, and he's completely manipulated by Freddy. Freddy dons the guise of his mother to manipulate him into like going on a spree. And the way to scare Jason is to relive his drowning. He is a sympathetic character for all his slaughter.
That's what makes Jason so enduring for me, is that at the core, there is an aggrieved, victimized, sympathetic character.
Like Frankenstein's monster, kind of.
Freddy, not sympathetic.
No.
Michael Myers, not a sympathetic character, even though we saw him as a child canonically.
Whereas if you look at the fan art of Jason, like I go to these horror conventions with my kids and they buy some of these things and they bring them home and it's like Jason toasting marshmallows. He's always depicted as like this kid.
One last thing I noticed that you have a particular affinity for, or a particular enjoyment of, is teeth getting knocked in and knocked out. What is it with you and teeth? This is just so disturbing.
For many years, I had a recurring nightmare of my teeth crumbling in my mouth, just falling out of my gums.
So it's just something that particularly scares you.
Yeah, it really bothers me. And then teeth trauma in things like Marathon Man. And there's that bit in Dog Soldiers when the thing has the sword through its chest and it's wrestling the guy and the point of the blade goes between his teeth and makes that squeaking noise. I'm like, oh.
It is pretty horrific.
Who is your favorite version of Jason in the series?
Easily 6. Yeah, when he comes back first, when he's zombie Jason is my favorite. Yeah. Even his look, he comes out all rotten and he puts the mask on and he's just this thing, but then he stalks those paintballer guys in the woods and he comes out with all the 80s tack gear. It's like Rambo suiting up. He's got the knife. In the novelization, I remember them saying that one of the guys playing the game or whatever was way into Rambo. Somebody had told him once that he looked a little bit like Stallone. He was going all in on it. So he had all this like Rambo gear shit along on a paintball thing that he did not need, like the machete and the knife. And you don't bring that stuff to paintball, you know? That was the reason. I like the gear that he's wearing. I love the gloves. They offset his aesthetic. You know, he has this rotten aesthetic, but he has these perfect like calfskin gloves. I don't know. There's something about his look that's really cool. And I love the fact it's the first time we see him around actual kids, like in the camp instead of the counselors, and he doesn't kill any of the kids, and that's interesting. And yeah, and I guess probably because that was, you know, you always love your first Jason the most. So.
When does 13th come out? When is it available?
This Friday. I originally really wanted it to come out. We just passed October, Friday the 13th, and it would have been absolutely perfect. I wrote the afterword on Friday the 13th, but yeah, I didn't make it.
What are you working on next?
I'm taking a break from novels to write a screenplay. I want to try to get a movie going again. I'm adapting a short story called FG Killer. So it's like a hip-hop kung fu slasher movie inspired by that movie Kung Fu Killer from a couple years ago. I love the opening to the Kung Fu Killer. It starts out as like a police investigation of a crime scene where like a wuxia fight happened. They're checking the trajectory and they're going all forensic science on like the sword cuts in the ceiling. How did this happen? And then they're like depicting guys flying all over the place on wires, killing each other. And I thought that was amazing. And it kind of gets away from that as it goes. But I wanted to do a slasher featuring like a flying guillotine and incorporate wuxia and hip hop.
Nice. Where can our listeners find you online?
Oh, I'm all over Facebook and I'm on Twitter and I have my blog, Delirium Tremens, erdelac.wordpress.
Thanks for coming on the show and thanks for telling us about 13th.
Thanks for asking about it. I appreciate it as always.
Please subscribe and follow. Links are in the show notes. You can find me at jeffccarter.com and hit the link to pick up my collection, We Bleed Orange and Black, 31 fun-sized tales for Halloween. Until next time, stay spooktacular.
There's a legend round here. A killer buried, but not dead. A curse on Crystal Lake. They say he died as a boy, but he keeps coming back. Few have seen him and lived. Some have even tried to stop him. No one can.
A slasher, the best there ever was. Skull masher, I bash him. My stature alone and cold gas.